What is an item worth? Basic economics would tell us that an item is worth whatever someone is willing to pay for it. You and I experience this principle regularly when we swear at the gas pump. The more people want something, the more it's worth. Some items, however, transcend this principle. A family heirloom, perhaps, or a cherished photograph. They are priceless. While here in the Great Lakes we find that some treasures are so abundant that they paradoxically become valueless. A shovel full of sand, or a pail of fresh water. There is also a rare third type of item that we must beware of. One that has a sort of negative value. One that you can't sell. One that you can't give away. One that you couldn't even pay to get rid of. In the world of the paranormal, we use a simple word to describe such an item. Cursed. Hello, and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 6 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today we travel to the neighbor cities of St. Joseph and Benton Harbor, Michigan, on the southwestern shores of Lake Michigan, for a story about an item of that very nature. It's a story that we hope has in fact finally come to a conclusion, as its retelling hopefully remains nothing more than an echo about the water. Episode 6, Heirloom. The red, blinking light meant doom. Whatever hopes you had, consider them gone. Whatever your life's plans happened to be, consider them canceled. Blow into the slot thingy, Mark's friend suggested. No, another boy objected. No, you have to blow into the game itself. Mark tried both, with no success. The Nintendo would not turn on. With a defeated sigh, he addressed his group of middle school friends, explaining that today would be an outside day. With voiced disapproval, the kids went out into the mid-1980s summertime, mounted their bikes, and set off down the streets of northern Benton Harbor. A short trip west put them within the city limits of St. Joseph, a popular harbor town in which the St. Joseph River opens up to the endless expanse of Lake Michigan. The group headed to their usual summer go-to, a pier located on the north side of the river where an iconic pair of white lighthouses glistened against the dark blue waters. They watched as the boats came and went into harbor, enjoying a hearty, cool, freshwater summer breeze. Mark's family had lived in the area since the mid-1800s, before Benton Harbor and St. Joseph were incorporated as towns. He knew, even at a young age, that it was the beauty of the lakefront that kept his family there. All right, so what are we going to do now? One of Mark's friends asked. Another friend's eyes widened as he explained that his mom warned him about a burnt-out house not far from where they were. But the group unanimously agreed that rummaging around a burnt-out house sounded dangerous and potentially illegal, as they quickly mounted their bikes and set off for it. When the group arrived, no trespassing signs were posted in several locations. Yellow police tape surrounded the entire lot, and an overpowering, ominous vibe was emanating from the burnt-out ranch-style house. Without hesitation, the group went to investigate. I saw this on the news a few days ago. Nobody got hurt, a friend explained. The guy who owns it was at work at the pawn shop that he owns. Mark breathed a sigh of relief. He was genuinely glad that no one was hurt. The scene was surreal. There it was, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom floor plan, all laid out in charred wood. Vague ruins provided a hint as to which room was which. Plumbing sticking out of a bathroom wall, or a twisted steel bed frame in the bedroom. Mark's eyes scanned the scorched remains of the floor as his friends began to announce their findings. A blackened silver dollar, a melted wristwatch, some disfigured kitchen utensils, and various knobs and switches, all covered in carbon and soot. Mark's eyes were immediately drawn to a small silver object, brilliantly shining in the afternoon sunlight. He recognized it immediately. It was a Zippo lighter. All the cool kids at school had them. With a quick glance around, he looked to see if any of his friends were nearby, and with them being oblivious to his find, Mark bent over to pick it up, planning on keeping his new lighter unannounced. But suddenly, wincing in pain, Mark immediately tossed the lighter back onto the rubble, grasping his hand. The Zippo was scorching hot to the touch. Mark swore loudly and kicked the lighter across the floor. After a bit more rummaging, hunger took over, and the group decided to split up for the night. Mark hopped on his bike and headed home for dinner, trying not to let the handlebars make contact with his aching hand. That evening, Mark sat at the dinner table with his mother, father, and 2 older sisters. The mood was upbeat and lively. As the group recounted their days, Mark felt compelled to mention the stop at the burnt-out house. His mother didn't look too happy about it, but his father didn't seem to mind. "Did you see anything interesting?" he asked Mark. "Kinda," Mark explained. "I found a Zippo. I was going to take it, but it was still too hot to touch." The clink of Mark's dad's fork startled the group as it hit the plate. Mark's father's expression went blank as he turned away from his food and towards Mark. "Do you have it on you?" he asked Mark with a definite sense of concern in his voice. "Do not lie. Did you take it?" Mark emphatically shook his head. "No." "Was it clean or dirty?" Mark's father asked, uncharacteristically sternly. Taken back by the question, Mark recalled the image in his mind. "Clean, I guess. It was shiny," Mark said. "Dad, look, I swear I didn't take it. I left it there. Whoever's it is can still get it. Like I said, it was still too hot to the touch because of the fire." His father cut him off, slamming his fist into the dinner table. "It couldn't have been hot, Mark. That fire was 3 days ago," he said, then storming out of the room and slamming the door behind him. The group was stunned. They sat in silence as they listened to the sound of the garage door opening, followed by the sound of Mark's father getting into his car and tearing off down the driveway. Mark awoke early the next morning when he heard his dad's car keys jingle once again. "Hey, Dad, where are you going?" Mark asked. "My fishing club is considering purchasing a new boat, and the dealer has a promotional model, so I'm going to go try it out," he replied. Mark was elated, seeing this as his free ticket to get out onto Lake Michigan. When Mark announced he would be going with, his father quickly snapped back. "No, you're not." Mark was so startled that he took a couple of steps back. "Dad?" he asked with concern. "Are you all right?" His dad then shook his head and apologized, reluctantly inviting Mark along. The boat was incredible. Center console, 300 horsepower of outboard motors. Not many vessels on the lake at the time could keep up with it. And Mark's dad had the throttle wide open. Smiling ear to ear, Mark leaned into the spray, blasting up from the choppy Lake Michigan waters. Looking up, Mark was surprised at how far out they were. Miles from shore, the lakefront seemed just a distant line on the horizon, and Mark had never before been this far out. Looking over towards his father to ask where they were going, he then noticed his father sneaking something out of his pocket. Not realizing Mark was watching, his father removed an old rag, unfolded it, and placed an item into his right hand, then tossing it overboard, reaching over quickly to make sure they were still at absolute full throttle. The object was unmistakable. It was the Zippo. Mark didn't say a word as they sped back towards shore. Entering between the piers of the St. Joseph River was Mark's favorite part of any boat trip. He always felt so cool while the people walking checked out his boat. Only this time he realized that people were not only looking, but pointing. And they didn't look impressed. They looked concerned. "Outboard fire! Starboard!" Mark's father abruptly shouted. "Mark, get to the front of the boat now!" One of the engines had caught fire and was now starting to billow smoke. "Okay, I'm going to pull up and I'm going to bump us into the pier. When I do, we hop off, got it?" Mark's dad explained. With a turn of the wheel and a blip of the throttle, they did just that. By the time the fire department arrived by boat, the vessel had been completely engulfed in flames, and the two watched in disbelief as it sunk into the river. The ride home was silent, eerily silent. Mark ran through every scenario that his mind could come up with to try to explain his father's odd behavior and the boat fire. Unnerved, Mark made an attempt at lightening the mood. "So the dealer seemed cool that you didn't want to buy it." "Mark, I know you saw me toss that thing into the water," his dad replied. "Mark, you did see me toss it, right? Before the smoke, right? It went in?" "Yes," Mark said quickly, as if he had anticipated the question itself. The two pulled into their driveway, and Mark's father told him to accompany him to a small office at the back of the house. It was there that Mark's father laid out the entire story. "I knew it had found us again the second you said Zippo," he explained to Mark. "The whole thing starts with your great-grandfather." Mark's father slid him an old photograph that was locked in a desk drawer. 7 firefighters standing in front of a large burned-out building. "This is him, my great-grandfather," he said, tapping on the man on the far right. "That photograph was taken on September 6th, 1896. You recognize the site, don't you?" he asked Mark. Of course, yeah," Mark said. "It's the Your Opera House. We studied it in school, and we probably saw this exact picture, and I never realized it was him." After a moment of silence, Mark's father put his head into his hands and replied, "Nobody's seen this picture, Mark. Check his left hand. What's he holding?" Mark's heart sank. Clear as day. The man in the photo held in his hand a small silver box, flap open, a Zippo lighter. Mark's father continued. "He found it after the fire had gone out, and they were searching through the rubble. There it was, he found it, unscathed, just like you did. And when he passed it on to his son, your great-grandfather, in the early 1900s, he did it with a warning. He said that the lighter always knew when a fire was about to break out. It would start to get hot to the touch." Mark's father leaned back in his chair, hands on his head, now staring at the ceiling. "Obviously, your great-grandfather dismissed all this as a tall tale. He'd forgotten about it completely until he found it in the rubble of his own workshop. He said it was completely undamaged and hot to the touch. He was scared and angry, so he threw it into the river, only to find it again when his son's, my grandfather's, barn burned down. When my dad passed it on to me, I knew better. That thing, Mark, it brings its own doom." His father finished, retrieving the lighter out of the desk drawer and slamming it onto the table. "Dad, but how?" Mark expressed his disbelief through a loss of words, followed by deafening silence. After a few moments of processing, Mark spoke again. "I watched it fall into the lake. I saw it go in, Dad, I swear." Mark's father grabbed his shoulders, almost hysterically. "That's how it works, Mark," he cried. "It wasn't looking for you, it was looking for me. You can't get rid of it. It can only be handed down to the next generation of us. Here, look at this." Mark's father opened another locked desk drawer, pulling out a stack of $5, $10, and $20 bills, several $100s worth, and with an exacerbated laugh said, "I've pawned that thing probably 50 times. It always finds its way back." His father then made Mark promise that he would ensure the lighter be placed in his suit pocket when he was buried. This time, his dad explained, it would not be getting passed along. This time it would go with Mark's father to the grave. Many years later, at his father's funeral, Mark did as instructed. He watched as the casket was closed with the lighter secure in his father's suit coat pocket. And Mark has not seen the Zippo since. Mark shared this story with me in person as we stood at the foot of his father's grave in northern Benton Harbor. Mark explained that he largely dismisses his father's family history as complete nonsense. It's very uncharacteristic for his father, but he thought it was nonsense nonetheless. I did ask him if he happened to keep the photo of his great-grandfather holding the Zippo, and to my absolute surprise, Mark walked back over to his truck and returned with the photo in his hand. And sure enough, there it was. At his feet, the remains of the Yore Opera House, dated 1896. In his hands, the unmistakable shape of a Zippo lighter, which wouldn't be invented until 1933. And with that, thank you sincerely for listening, and for making some room for a bit of high strangeness while you live out your own life story. May it be as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.